Hey Rockstars, I'm JB, expert salesperson and master presenter.
I'm the doctor, psychologist, and behavioral expert.
This is the Entrepreneur Mastery Lab podcast.
We're high-performance coaches that help service-based professionals and entrepreneurs take their skills to the next level.
70% of entrepreneurs fail, which is why every week we have real talk with real entrepreneurs to help ensure you are not one of them.
We're also the inventors of the Be Rich mindset,
where we rise to mastery,
inspire greatness,
celebrate knowledge,
and help others along the way.
So join us in the lab.
And now, on to the show.
Thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
So it's an interesting thing. We're big believers in experimentation, and so we're always kind of trying to experiment and tweak and figure out what's going to work best. And so tonight we thought we'd experiment a little bit, not just with the new Facebook Live features, but even with how we're structuring this. And so what you might not know is locally, we run a series called Better Business Brewing. And it's some of our free live events that we do in South Florida. And typically they take place at breweries and other fun places where you can have a drink. And so tonight, we thought as an experiment with our Q&A, we might try to integrate a little bit of Better Business Brewing. So what are we doing here, Doc? What did we decide on?
We decided on some bourbon.
We did.
Cheers.
We did. So we both have some bourbon. It's tough to see with the muted backgrounds. But we thought we'd actually open up just chatting a little bit about our drinks and what we're drinking. So April, don't know if you're drinking anything or drink at all, but if you are, salute to you. Cheers. And Doc, here's to a first time Better Business Brewing online event. Cheers.
Cheers, cheers.
So what are you drinking? That's what I want to know.
I'm starting my night off with Hudson. I don't see if we can get it on the camera without the blur.
Is that the baby bourbon?
It is the Hudson baby bourbon. Oh.
Very nice.
You
might have to drop the blur. Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Hudson baby. You can sponsor us, please. We'll accept that, Hudson.
Yes, that is a sponsor we are looking for.
That's a good one, by the way. I got introduced to Hudson Baby quite a while back, a few years ago, by I think one of my childhood friends might have introduced it to my dad, actually. So somebody who family friend since second or third grade or something like that. So you're talking 7, 8 years old. You like it?
And you raided the liquor cabinet after?
It's a good one. So over here, I don't know if you can see it. I got some Breaker bourbon, which is not bad. It's not, if you can't tell, it's not can you tell? No, it's really tough to see. It's not a new bottle. You know, I've had my fair share. Oh, it's coffee time in her time zone. Well, we talked about doing coffee too, but it's almost 7:30 here where we're at, April. We kind of said, it might be a little late to do coffee. If we do these on other times, we could certainly do coffee because pretty sure we enjoy that too.
One of us.
Well, I do.
One of us.
Actually, April, it's a funny story. I quit coffee for like 2.5 years because I felt like I had developed an addiction to it. I needed it. I don't know if you feel that way. So my family called me crazy, but it's true. I quit. I just completely one day said I had enough. I did it when I was on my own and nobody was around me for me to be grumpy around. But I felt better after like 72 hours. And I went, almost 2 years without having really any caffeine outside of an occasional piece of chocolate.
Quitters never prosper.
Whatever. It was fun to accomplish. I did never manage to quit sugar, which is the one that, I probably ought to have tried to do, but hey, she's appreciating. She probably thinks I'm crazy for quitting caffeine at all.
So quick, April, what time zone are you in? Where are you joining us from? And we get there's a few seconds delay from our end to asking you the questions from you hearing it. So if we pause, that's why.
And while she's looking to ask that, Doc, we opened it up to questions. We didn't really have a lot. I did chat with somebody before we kicked this off earlier today, and they asked about referral marketing and building a business, a referral-based business, and actually how to accelerate that and speed it up, because it can feel like a really slow build sometimes, and it's tough to do. So when you don't have any money in advertising, you're not really doing any budget in marketing, how do you speed that up? And it's really tough. But it's probably a good conversation to kick off.
So kick it off.
All right. So, it's an interesting thing, because my entire business, I run a business outside of JBandTheDoctor, and that business is really pretty much 100% referral driven. Everything I do in that business is referral driven, and there's no magic wand, right, to speeding up referral marketing and networking. But there are some things you can do which are really effective. And I think number one is really just finding centers of influence. So you've got limited scale when you're doing referral business building, because arguably you can't really build relationships with more than maybe, let's call it 150 people in any given year. Well, and by the way, welcome from the Philippines, April. Nice to have you join us. So you're limited, right? 150 people. If you're really going to touch on them, the magic amount of times you want to touch on them, which, believe it or not, is 26 times in a year, no matter what you're doing that with, 26 times to touch on somebody you want a relationship with. You can't really do that more than 150 people, not well. You could do like 500 people, you're just not going to do it well. And 80% of that 500 probably not driving most of the business. Probably 80% of the business is coming from 20%, which is really only 100. So you have 500 people you're trying to do this with. You really should be focusing on around 100 and just doing it right. But centers of influence, hands down, the number one way I think you can accelerate that. You find somebody who is embedded and involved with your market, but not directly your market. And they're seeing your market every day and talking to your market every day. And you become the resource for them for your specific service. And all of a sudden you have just multiplied yourself. So rather than finding, 100 individuals that could drop you one piece of business, you really want to find 100 individuals that are 3, 4, 5 times a day working within your marketplace. And that's the fastest way, I think, to accelerate that type of networking and marketing.
That's good. And I would say I was fully listening to you, but I wasn't.
Wow, how the turntables have turned.
I am not the one that needs to listen as much as to you, as I hear you enough every day. I was more engaged in setting up everything for our folks that are joining us.
It looks so good, though. And we got a few more people watching us, so that's kind of neat. It does look good.
We did. That's why I wanted to set it up.
Yeah. So kind of a neat thing. I love referral marketing. You have to put effort into it, though. I mean, that is a full-time business, and it's not something you can do an hour a day. I mean, you really have to commit to that business model. But I would argue, I don't care what business model you're in, Doc. If you really want to market effectively, whatever you're trying to do, you just have to be consistent. And consistency is the key to success in any business endeavor. There are no overnight successes as far as I'm concerned. It's consistent, repeatable, actionable things that you do over and over again, and you will have success. You don't do it repeatedly and consistently, guess what you won't have?
Success.
You might have a drink, but you're not going to have much else.
I play around nicely, so I caught that piece. But it's interesting when you talk about consistency, that's just like the key to any behavior habit you create, right? Is you have to be consistent with it. So if you want a consistent good habit, new behavior, if you're not consistent with it, it won't stick. No. So it makes sense that it would be needed in other worlds, in other areas the same way, right?
So Doc, April actually asked us a question on here. I don't know if you can see that. If not, you can. So this is a really interesting one because huge jump in popularity recently. MLMs get a bad rap, right? There's a really bad reputation around MLMs, and yet there's a lot of really successful MLM businesses out there, or businesses like MLMs. So probably the key here is to differentiate the difference between like the pyramid scheme and the MLM, because there are businesses that are designed that I would call MLMs, multi-level marketing, April, where your primary purpose is to recruit beneath you. And as you recruit to scale, you'll draw people on. And here in the States, for example, you have publicly traded companies that run this business model. Companies like Primerica are a great example. Primerica is a insurance and financial advisory firm where they license up their folks. They focus on the middle class, so they focus on everyday people, and they sell insurance products, and they help provide insurance coverage to people that would get ignored by your kind of traditional higher end financial planners and advisors. Their role, though, is really to bring on more agents and bring on more advisors. And you can run a very successful people. I know people have made a lot of money doing that, and the business model does work. And you don't get to become a publicly traded company unless you have some serious revenue behind you. You know, you look at something like the S&P 500, which is the top index here in the States to really focus on today for your 500 largest companies. You're not getting on there unless you have a market cap that's a certain amount of stocks floating out there and a value associated with those stocks, where you can really turn around and say, hey, we're a big fish, and you've got to be big and you've got to stay that way. So to be publicly traded, whether it's on the S&P or a NASDAQ, which is, you know, more tech focused index, requires some substantial business chops and a foundation as a business. So the multi-level marketing can and does work, but you do have to be careful that it's not a pure pyramid scheme where really the only people who are going to make money are the people at the very top. What is most true about any multi-level marketing company, though, is that earlier you're on board and the sooner you're on board and the more effective you are at bringing people underneath you, the greater your earning potential will be. So the later you are to it, the harder it's going to be to earn money. It's not for everybody. I think that's key. And you're writing here.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
While you're reading that, I think the important pieces are obviously make sure you do your research on any of the companies to make sure that it is a valid company, because it's also one of the best markets to run scams in, especially the ones that you have to purchase the product and you have to keep so much going alive to keep feeding back into it. So again, some of those are valid, some of them aren't. You just really have to make sure you do your research. But what I would say bigger than that, no matter what you're looking at, there's something you can make money in pretty much any way if you have the passion into it. So if you're already questioning that passion going in before you even start the work, that might be your answer to your question. You might not already feel comfortable in that world. That might not be something that plays to your strengths. There is the other thought of you can give stuff a try, because it doesn't really hurt to try things a lot of times. Again, as long as you're doing the research to make sure it's a valid company, because you don't always know what you're good at or what you enjoy until you actually try it. So if there's no danger to it, or if there's no real negative that you're taking away from just giving it a shot, give it a shot, especially if you can do it on the side while you're doing something else. You may find that you are really passionate and really good at it. Or you may find out that you confirmed your thought beforehand that it's not something for you. And then there's nothing lost except for you have new information knowing that that's not something you want to try in the future.
I'm going to say, Doc, you actually stole the words out of my mouth. I think if you find something you're passionate about and a service or a product you believe in and you can use and you recognize that other people can use, it becomes a lot more natural. That pushy feeling kind of disappears. It goes away. And pushy is, people are really bad at sales for the most part. People are really bad. In really good sales, you're attracting people to you, and people are kind of seeing the benefit that you get or provide with the products or services that you offer, and they want to be a part of that. That is really effective selling. It's helping people identify when there is a need or a service that they're either aware of or they're unaware of, but helping them identify that and then going ahead and providing it is very different than pushing. So if you feel like you're pushing, I would say it's one of two things. You're either not passionate, you don't really believe in what you're looking at, in which case you probably should avoid it because you're going to struggle. It's going to be hard. a lot harder than it should be, or you're pushing it and you're feeling pushy because you're putting it in front of somebody that really doesn't need it or doesn't understand that they need it. So either the wrong audience or lack of education for that audience. And number 2 is a big one. A lot of people never take time to educate and be educated, and that's going to make it really difficult to have success in any sales role.
And the education piece is why I say to give things a try sometimes if you're not sure, because you don't have that education about yourself for yourself yet. So trying these things and giving things, whether you're playing a new instrument or, watching a show that's outside of your genre. What's really big right now on YouTube is reaction videos to old. So it's a lot of the younger audience reacting to music they've never heard before. So generally they say old, but they say 90s. And I don't really think that's old. But older music that they're not experienced with and outside of the genres that they like. And now they're finding out they have a whole new catalog of music they're interested in that they just wrote off. And it was only because they've never experienced it or took a shot at it. And now that they had the open mind to try it, now all of a sudden they're like, I like this music better than what I've been listening to. So it's really, again, getting to know yourself a little bit as well. And if you're in the opportunity in that space to have that opportunity to try different things without a negative consequence, I say give it a shot just to see. Does that help answer some of that for you, April? If you have any follow-ups, let us know on that.
It's a good question. That they're prevalent. I mean, they're out there a lot. So I'm glad we had a chance to address that a little bit.
Excellent. How's that bourbon going down for you, JB?
Well, when I do these things, I always do, and it's tough to see, but I do that solid block of ice right there, and that always gives me a nice little smooth down the throat.
I do have the solid block of ice, but it's also South Florida, so it's not really much ice anymore. Now it's like a small piece of cube left.
And I'm just reading April's most recent comment, and I would say that right there might be a red flag of the difference between a pyramid scheme and a true MLM.
And so what I'm going to do, because this also goes on to our podcast in the upcoming weeks, I'm just going to go ahead and read, which we probably should have done ahead of time. But as you haven't caught on, we were talking about some multi-level marketing and if it's a good business. But the follow-up April's asking is she's like, doesn't feel like getting rich from other people's money, who's paying for registration fees, trying to onboard. So she doesn't like the pressure of having just to push to invite people without having, just to do it. And I could totally appreciate that. I have a hard time too with that. That was always my challenge early in my career, trying to sell stuff. And that's why I'm not big into sales as much as JB was, right? That's why I had a different passion. I sold things, but it was more things that people needed.
Right. And one of the ways I think regulatory speaking in the States, they define pyramid scheme is, what's the upfront cost? What's your investment to get in? Is there any, first of all? And do you have a realistic chance of making a profit after the cost of registration and the cost of the product and so on and so forth? And so here in the United States, at least, they make companies that are involved in multi-level marketing show exactly what percentage are earning at different levels. And it's pretty incredible because you can see, oh, wow, you can make 6 figures. You can make $100,000, $200,000. It's like, sure, 2% of the people in this MLM do, and there's 10,000. So, hey, you know what? I mean, you're talking a few hundred people that are making money and thousands that are not making much at all. So you do need to be careful with that. And I think, just to reiterate though, if you feel good about it and it's a service or a product that you use and you believe in, and that the people around you could use, and it passes the smell test, you've got to use your own filters here, then it's worth trying. It's worth experimenting. Too many people don't take any risk, and there's no reward without at least a little risk.
And thank you so much, April, for that great question. I hope we're not butchering your name. because I barely can get my name out right, and it says Doc on it. But we do appreciate the great questions, because that's again why we're here and holding this event and the podcast and inside the EML group, is because we want to stir these kind of conversations. A lot of people are having the same kind of issues. And this was actually a great segue to one of the things that I heard a lot this week, was about setting realistic expectations. And a lot of people a couple of people I talked to this week actually brought this up, and I thought this was perfect for something for us to talk about today, is how do we set some realistic expectations going into something? And I think that's something, again, what April's looking at right here, right? If she chooses to do something like this, if you go in with some realistic expectations of what you're expecting, like you just said, 2% wind up being that level. And you know that you're probably, the chance of getting to that 2%, at least in the beginning, or at least for a while, is very low. And you temper those expectations, and you can be really okay with what you're doing. And that goes into all different worlds, having realistic expectations of starting a workout program, starting a diet, starting a new business, starting a Facebook group, starting a podcast, is which we, I'm pointing out things that we do every day here, that we're kind of known for too, that, we had to temper our expectations quite a bit going into that. Especially if you go out the gate pretty quick and you see these great numbers right away. And then that idea of, how do I keep this pace? And I know JB likes to tell stories, but I got a good one for terrible job I did for like a month. I don't even know if I lasted that long.
You have a story?
I do.
For us? I'm so excited.
Don't ruin it. I worked for an outbound call center. It was like a backup job in between other stuff. Way, way, way back. I won't say the year, because I'm only 23. So today, see, unrealistic expectations I just set for you. But I was doing this job, and it was basically getting people. It had something to do with stocks. I don't even really remember what it was, because that's how little I cared. But it was reaching out to cold leads to try to get them in front of the actual person doing the sales. And so my job was just trying to get them excited enough to get onto the next phone call. And in my first week, I absolutely killed it. I did purely luck of the people that I got on that call list. I know for sure, because I didn't know the heck I was doing, but they wound up closing like 3 people off that first week. So I was money. I was golden. I was the superstar coming up from the bottom ranks. I got taken out to lunch for that week, and that didn't hold because I didn't know what I was doing and didn't like what I was doing. So I wound up finding most of the time just using the phone to call people in different areas. This is back when long distance cost money and you couldn't do it from your home so easily. So I was just randomly calling family members throughout the country during my time, because I didn't really want to call people. So I set them some very unrealistic expectations the first week. And that's why I didn't last long after that, because I knew I couldn't live up to them. And I also had the expectation that this was not something that I enjoyed doing, and quickly learned that that was not the field for me. But it was a hell of a week.
That's interesting, Doc. I wonder if you're discounting something a little bit about that first few days you were doing the work. And I don't know, but a lot of times, our energy is what sells people. And even if you don't know what you're talking about, it's amazing what really good energy and excitement and a little bit of passion. You might not have a clue, but if people think you're excited, it's unbelievable. I mean, people will respond to that in a totally different way. So I'm wondering if just those first few days, you were excited enough about doing something new and potentially, earning some extra income, and you felt good about it for a few days and you had this success, but then you quickly realized it came crashing down, and
just like
all this. Yeah, no, I know. Just like my webcam crashing down, and you turned around and said, this isn't for me. And all of a sudden, not shockingly, your numbers crashed along with my webcam.
Which absolutely, and I mean, as you guys that have listened to me at any span at all know, I say this a lot: more than one thing can be true, right? So I believe probably both of those true. It's probably a perfect storm of the right leads, a little bit of energy, naivete of not knowing what it was like to get turned down at that point yet. And, some excitement of being in there, being new, being surrounded by people that were successful. I mean, the owner of the company, the only person in the company that had this, but the owner of the company had a very nice car. Everybody else that worked there did not, including the people that I was trying to get up to. But the owner did, so he obviously knew what he was doing. But that was that kind of excitement when you're younger that you see those things and you're like, oh yes, this is where I'm headed for 3 days.
It's amazing what can incentivize you when you're young. 23 years old, a good car, nice car. That says, success. Might not have been success. Could have just been a really big lease payment. You don't
Very
know.
possible. I don't know how much longer that company lasted after I left, but I know it wasn't probably a lot.
But that is a business where you can make a lot of money if you're good at what you do, financial services. So it's interesting. That's interesting. So we talked MLM, we talked setting expectations, and it's from a sales background, just digging at that a little bit more, Doc. Setting expectations to me is the biggest thing most people get wrong in sales. Most people just get expectations totally off in sales. They're really bad at setting them. I met some great people that I really like and have been in industries and business for a lot of years. And then I've seen and heard them work with people, and their setting of expectations is god awful. And I don't know how they've been in business so long. Pure grit and perseverance, maybe, because to me, it was a complete failure in your most important role in any sales position. And by the way, I firmly believe 43% of everybody's work is sales. Don't care what you do. So this is for everybody. If you don't set expectations, well, I mean, it's just life's going to be hard, unnecessarily hard. So big tip from me, Doc, I think for our listeners out there, if you have an opportunity to set expectations, please, please, please just set them low and beat and exceed them. If you can do that, you'll look great. Set them high and fail to hit them.
Especially early, because I can right now hear some of the listeners pushing back on that and saying, well, if you don't set your goals high, you'll never achieve anything more. So it's also get to know yourself. So if you know you need that kind of pressure, okay. But I would argue exactly what JB was just saying. When you're starting out and setting goals and you're creating these ideas, set those expectations lower so you can start to build some of that momentum, so you can start to get some of that under you. And then as you start to get an idea of what's realistic for you, you can start to challenge that and push it a little bit farther and farther. Also, all we do know about setting goals and these expectations is we don't want to hit all of them. If we hit all of them, then we know we're not challenging ourselves as well. But important, very important when you're starting out, especially if it's something new for you, make those first few goals, make sure those first few expectations very attainable so that you can start to build that momentum. And then you can always go from there.
And one of the easiest actionable ways to do that, Doc, is probably to take a big reach goal and break it down into small little goals. That way you can still have something that's challenging to get to and accomplish, but the little steps along the way, you can have some pretty quick success with. Yeah, I don't know that I've ever in my head thought about setting that expectations for yourself in the same way that I think about setting expectations for clients, but really there is no difference. And it's probably a good lesson I could take, that there's something to be said about that, setting expectations for yourself that are very attainable to at least get the momentum going. Something you said though, big believer in putting a challenge out there, putting a stretch out there that you've got at least a 50-50 chance of failure versus success. You could fail. But by striving and pushing yourself to try to achieve, you can really learn a lot about yourself. And I think that should be done every now and then, not all the time.
And I want to erase that word failure from the vocabulary too, because everything we try is education for us. It becomes new evidence. It becomes we're testing these things, right? So sure, it might technically fail. We didn't achieve it, but we learned so much from that. We learned where we could set for. We learned what things might have stopped us from getting to that goal. We learned, do we set it too high because it was impossible to do? And now we know it's more possible or probable at that moment. So I don't know if we even fail in things that we don't achieve. I think we learn and then we make adjustments and try again.
$1 million question, Doc. Do we learn better from failure or success? And I know we're taking the word failure and saying, hey, failure isn't what we have in our heads as being, right? Let's change our definition of failure. Failure is not negative. Failure just means we did not have whatever success we sought initially.
Absolutely.
But there's an absolute argument that you will learn much more from a failure than you ever will from a success. And if everything we do is an experiment and evidence in order to learn something new, whatever lessons you're taught are able to pick up that are most impactful or most influential or the quickest to pick up are probably the best, especially when we have limited resources and time. So failure, not a bad thing at all. Failure is a good thing. And can I take a quick sales spin around on this too? Sales is a numbers game. So people will a lot of times say, oh, I need to make 10 calls or set 10 appointments to get a yes. And they get a no and they get really upset, right? They failed. But you know what? A no is just, if you got to get 10 of these to get to a yes, a no is one of them that you need to get. You need 9 no's. You can't get to the yes without 9 no's. Are no's bad? No's are good. It's when you don't have a yes or a no that's bad.
And again, it goes back to what you're willing to set for an expectation for yourself, right? If you can set an expectation that 10% is good for me, and then know what your number is, like, so the expectation is I'll land 10% of what I'm trying. Fair number. You start out with that. Then well, if you need 10, then you need 100. Like you need to put out for 100. If you need 100, you need to put out for 1,000. So if you have that realistic expectation of what you're shooting for, then you get to push to that number that you'll have to go for. So then it takes away the idea of that failure also. That takes away, this is just the process. I'm playing the odds here on this is where I have to get to get to that number. And again, failure is not necessarily a bad word. And if we can just redefine that for ourselves, is to know it's just a word and it's just basically an adjective on what we're describing in that situation. And not have that negative connotation to beat ourselves up around it. It actually could be very, very powerful. Now, not the only time, because that's extreme, but one of the only times that I don't want you to have some realistic expectations when talking about goals is when you're setting really long-term goals, right? So if you're reaching out 10 years, I want those goals to be the absolute most craziest off the wall things you could possibly think about, right? I want you to think of, this seems so impossible that I'm putting it down on my 10-year goal, because we don't know what's possible in 10 years. If you look back 10 years to where we are now, I mean, heck, there's a lot of things that no one even thought of or were like, that was so unrealistic, and we're doing it. And each time you add that increment, it gets even crazier on the stuff that we could accomplish. So be so unrealistic when you're writing your 10-year goals. Obviously throwing some stuff there that you might want to achieve that was in your realm. I feel like you want to get married and have kids or something to that extent, or plan for your retirement. Those kind of things are smart. But when you're reaching, that's the time to reach. That's the time to go to the extreme and say, I'm going to own a flying car, right? Because sounds crazy in this moment, but probably not as crazy as it sounded 10 years ago.
Well, so Doc, one of my favorite sayings, which and probably our listeners will learn over time if you're new to hearing from me, it's all about perspective and creating perspective. 10 years is a lifetime. I mean, and people knock Facebook. There's something really neat about Facebook that I love, and it's the memories. Because if you go back 10 years ago and you were on Facebook and you have memories on Facebook from a decade ago, you'll probably be shocked at who you were 10 years ago versus who you are today. And you won't notice that difference every day. But if you take a snapshot from 10 years ago and then you look at it today, you go, oh my gosh, am I different? Even technology. And I have a great example of this from Facebook memories. I don't know, just popped up on my memories not too long ago. I was talking about cell phones and how I was looking at some cell phone and I just couldn't be sure I wanted to get that cell phone because it didn't have a keyboard, because my cell phone didn't have a keyboard. And it's hard to realize, but 10 years ago, the iPhone was kind of still new. The iPhone really, 07, 08, the iPhone really came out. So think about that. iPhone's really only 13, 14 years.
Back then. Now,
yeah, it was BlackBerry. That's perspective. That's a powerful thing. 10 years is a lifetime.
I will say, if you have a social media that's 10 years old, make sure you go back and check some of those pictures and maybe some of the things that you wrote and maybe do some cleanup, because some of these things don't age very well. And if you plan on going viral one day, you know they're going back. They're going back deep. So make sure that your past is something you still want to represent yourself today with. And if not, do some spring cleaning. Or
does make me,
as it would be right now.
Does make me glad that there wasn't as much digital world when we were younger. Cheers to that.
Absolutely. I've said cheers a lot of times over the years. I'm glad there wasn't cameras around.
Yeah, salute to that. So this has been a fun conversation, Doc.
It has been. We got a couple of minutes left if anyone wants to throw out a last message. If not, we're just going to kind of chat and wrap some stuff up. Let us know what you think as you're listening to this, maybe even on the replay, or if you are checking it out on our podcast. And for those of you listening live or on Facebook and you don't know our podcast, it's very, very simple. It's the Entrepreneur Mastery Lab podcast. How about that? You can find that on all your favorite platforms: Spotify, Apple, Google, our website, JBandTheDoctor.com. Look at all those places that we have these things. We make it really easy for you, so there's really no excuse.
Yeah. I know it's our first time testing this out, and it could be the bourbon speaking, but I kind of like this experiment of Better Business Brewing Q&As, talking a little bit about bourbon or scotch or beer before we kick off some business.
And I'm just going to repeat, because we have some newer listeners at this point and newer viewers coming in that might not know what JB was just referencing. We host Better Business Brewing. We were doing it monthly there for a while, in live and in person here in South Florida, which we will be continuing to do again very soon. But we thought that same kind of energy and excitement that we did live will be the way that we do our Q&As going forward throughout our Facebook group and our community. So Better Business Brewing is basically a good reason for us to drink a bourbon or a beer, and maybe a scotch one or 2 days. Whatever tickles our throat that day. Is that the ways? That didn't sound right.
Tickles our fancy. I don't know what you're doing over there.
Wetting our whistle?
Wetting our whistle maybe. And it's fun, right? Because, we talk about perspective, and we talk, like, you're drinking a Hudson Baby bourbon, and correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while since I looked at that bottle, but 2 years or less for aging on that?
I believe so. Yeah, this is an early cast, which 4 years, I believe it is. Yeah,
4 years. Okay. And the breaker I'm drinking is at least 5. But some of these things, 8, 10 years, certainly in the scotches, 12, 15, 20.
So while we're putting that out there, if any of our favorite or soon to be favorite distillers want to send us some products to test on this, while we are doing the Better Business Brew and answering these wonderful questions, we would love to taste your product and give you a shout out live here in front of all our lovely people.
I'm also open if any of you would like us to try something as part of this and part of our experiment, and you say, hey, you should really try this. Let's hear you try this and see what you think and like. Throw us the names of a good drink And hey, I'll make this promise to you right now. I'll go out and I'll find it and I'll bring it on the next show. We'll give it a try.
This is where I think a little bit ahead of JB sometimes.
Okay, so within reason. Within reason.
If you want to send us one of those things to taste.
Smart man.
We can easily give you an address, or if you want to drop it off at one of our events, we'll be happy to take those bottles off your hand and give them a shot.
Quite literally. We'll give them a shot.
That's how you do it.
Ba-da-bum. Nice. All right, Doc. You know what? Salute, buddy. This is fun.
Shandam. It was great, and we appreciate everyone and joining us, and some great questions. April, that was a wonderful question. We enjoyed getting to learn something about you too, and where you're from, and we look forward to hearing more of the audience. So make sure you're engaging inside the group. If you are listening to this on the podcast and don't know what we're talking about, which you should, because we say it 100 times inside the podcast too, because shameless plugs. The Entrepreneur Mastery Lab Facebook group is where you find us. It's free to join. You come in, you get to ask questions and be part of the podcast, be part of the podcast too, if you like, but part of these lives, and ask questions and get some actual good feedback for what you're looking for. And not only on these lives, we do that every single day inside the group. And not only us, all the rock stars that are members and part of the community also give great insight and feedback daily. So if you're not there, be there.
Yeah. And you'll always be able to know if we had too much to drink if we can't pronounce Entrepreneur Mastery Lab.
You might not know that, me, because that's a word I don't.
It's just my way of messing with Doc over here.
When I get excited, my words run together sometimes. That's the excitement coming out. Maybe a little of bourbon.
That is his excited face, folks. That's about as much as you're going to get. All right, Doc, this was a lot of fun. Thanks, buddy. And thank you for our viewers. Nice to see you here, and look forward to seeing you in the lab.
We will see you soon. We're signing off. Remember to follow us on all social media at JBandTheDoctor. Check out our blog, and of course, listen to the podcast. And you know what? Go have a nightcap.
Or a morning cap. Get yourself that coffee.
There's nothing wrong with a little something in the coffee. I won't tell.
Unless it's the morning, and then no.
5 o'clock. So.
All right.
Just be responsible. That's all we have.
Be responsible. There you go. All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. JB out.
Peace out, yo.